What's up, Tyler?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going fantastic.
Fantastic.
Can I tell everyone the picture that you sent me today?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Your underwear is disintegrating.
Well, all right, so let's tell the background story.
That's the whole story.
I mean, that kind of is the whole story, but I had to go to the bathroom in the porta potty today, and I looked down, and there's just like
You mean
a
the blue job site sauna? But go ahead.
exactly. There's just like a 3-inch hole in my, not a tear, like a perfect circular hole in the bottom of my underwear
Your skin is melting the fabric of your
It was
underwear.
like a perfect circle. And I saw it and I was like, oh damn, ripped my underwear. Then I'm like, how's it a perfect circle? And then I started thinking, like, was I walking around my house this morning? Like, cause sometimes I'll just leave my work clothes downstairs and I'll like have underwear on the wall. And I was like, was I walking around my house just with a 3-inch hole in my underwear and nobody said anything? But then I realized the girls slept at my mom's house last night, so it was just Rachel and myself.
The dog probably tried to tell you, but you just
Yeah.
weren't listening.
If I haven't got any text messages from Rachel with like a picture of it yet, so I think maybe it happened. Yeah, either got dressed upstairs this morning or it happened post leaving the house.
Well,
But maybe that'll be the teaser for the episode.
the picture of those.
Just my hole in my underwear.
I don't know if you want to. I don't know if people want to see that photo. I was in a meeting and I'm like, I got to take this. I got to see what this is about.
I'm gonna sell them on Patreon.
Ugh. All right. Well, this week we have Jason from Pine State Builders, residential and light commercial general contractor serving Washington County, Maine. Which, if you want to know where that is, it's 2 hours north of Bar Harbor, essentially way north, coastal Maine.
Yeah, so he's essentially due west of Grand Manan. We had I think his name's
Big
Aaron
dog.
Jones.
Yeah.
Big Dog.
He said he could see him. Or
Yeah.
something like
He was like 12 miles
yeah,
or
12
something
miles.
from
Yeah.
him. So from like a geographic perspective, he's very far north. And I could be quoting this incorrectly, but I feel as though when I looked up the county that he's in, it's like the easternmost county in the United States.
So he moved from Connecticut, moved up there, and thought he would just go right to work, and had a little bit of a different experience getting into the trade, and then eventually starting his business. But he talks about scaling his business, hiring great people, not having the right processes in place to the point where he had to scale back his business, and then really work on refining the processes. And we talk about that, but we also talk about, what is next step? If you're able to scale back and refine the process, what does the ideal project look like? And I think most interestingly, doing that in a county that is not very populated. What marketing strategies are you going to be taking advantage of in an area that doesn't have a lot of people, doesn't have a lot of contractors, and it's just kind of, I don't know, not in the middle of nowhere, but on the edge of nowhere.
Edge of nowhere. Yeah, so he's looking to adopt a lot of building principles and standards that I don't know a ton about his area, but you would seem that we're not as prominent in his area. So couple that with not growing up in that area, being a newly formed business, I'm sure that he struggles with a lot trying to get this off the ground. So if you're somebody who has a new business, are looking to break out of a market that doesn't necessarily do the type of work that you're doing and just want to hear somebody's perspective of that, it'll be a good listen for you.
This podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. Andersen is introducing their new 100 series flush fin window this spring. The product allows for easy installation in stucco applications without the hassle of disturbing the stucco, saving time and money.
With Andersen, contractors in the Southwest now have replacement solutions for any project. Their Fibrex material is the ultimate solution in Southwest climates, 2 times stronger than vinyl, and with a finish 12 times thicker. Fibrex withstands 150-degree temperatures. Even in dark colors, these windows won't fade, flake, blister, or peel, And now with the new flush fin product, upgrading old aluminum windows has never been easier.
And every new product introduced by Andersen is developed with the innovation, quality, and craftsmanship that has defined their brand for nearly 120 years. Learn more about the difference by visiting andersenwindows.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Buildertrend. In the last 30 days alone, 130,000 jobs were started in Buildertrend. And even more impressive, 1.4 million jobs total were managed in the platform last year.
And Forbes awarded the system Best Client Portal industry-wide.
Our friends at Buildertrend have helped thousands of construction pros achieve more, and you could be one of them.
Because your success is their success, Buildertrend's highest priority is supporting their customers.
And whether you like one-on-one training or you prefer to learn on your own, they've got support options to help you get started using the platform to its fullest capability.
Sooner or later, every successful building business outgrows spreadsheets and pen and paper planning. With Buildertrend, there are no growing pains. Get started now at buildertrend.com/MC support.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Dude, that's the first time I've done that. That's probably not true. I know. I was rolling, man. Like
That was
just
a good time.
fuck. I'm an idiot. I know I hit the button, but you know when you click a mouse and like sometimes it doesn't click. I think
Yeah.
that's what I did. I'm just gonna pretend we didn't have a conversation for 3 minutes and start over. So
Sure.
hey, you're from Maine.
I live in Maine. I'm from Connecticut.
You're from
Right.
Connecticut. You hate Connecticut. You moved
I
to
don't hate
Maine.
Connecticut. I just never
I
care to go back.
I apologize. I'm putting words in your mouth. Where in Maine are you?
I'm up in, I live in the town of Whiting, which is a very small town outside of a small town called Machias.
And that's 2 hours north of Bar Harbor.
Yep, right up the coast, so northeast, I guess you consider it.
So yeah, I was in Bar Harbor probably like 4 months ago for a wedding, and we took the Cape Air from Boston. Which
Yeah,
have you ever taken that?
I haven't. I haven't usually for us, if we're flying anywhere, it's from, we fly to Bangor or Portland.
Got it. It's 6-person, I think, or maybe 8, and they they put the people in the small plane by weight, and
Mhm.
they were like, "Hey, we need a co-pilot." So I raised my hand. I'm like, "Hell yeah!" And they were like, "All right, there's a couple rules." I'm like, "Great, give them
Don't
to me."
touch anything.
They're like, "Don't touch anything." I'm like, "That's bullshit." Like the whole point of raising my hand, I thought I was gonna help. Just like have me flip a switch or something.
Yeah, put it on
But
autopilot. You can play around anyway. Yeah.
but it's so cool because like you fly real low and you get to see the whole coast going up.
Hmm.
There's a point where then you're just straight over water. But it was really cool. And it's funny, people were driving up there from Boston and we made it there like 2 hours before them.
Yeah, it's a good
And
6-hour drive. I have a twin brother down in Massachusetts, so we get together often, and it's regularly a 6.5 hour drive.
yeah.
How
What
did you wind up there?
Um, I ended up here. My wife's an optometrist, and we ended up out here via the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I went to college. Actually, my wife and I both went to college out there, and after some moving around, I lived in Massachusetts for a handful of years. Wanted to get back to the Upper Peninsula, and my wife was optometry school at the time, and I moved back to Michigan, worked for a builder. She got a great opportunity to come out to Maine, so we packed up and moved to Maine, and then I started figuring it out from there.
I heard the Upper Peninsula is nice.
Beautiful.
Never been. Now Nick's looking it up.
Don't
how
go.
can you tell?
Don't go in the wintertime. I lived up there for about 5 or 6 years, and it's beautiful year round, but it's a ton of snow and it gets very cold. I was up on right on Lake Superior.
I mean, where you are now doesn't?
Um, it's less cold and less snow, but it's like if you look, it's like on really close, like on the same parallel. But I don't know if we're insulated by the ocean or
Mm.
what. But
So you said you're in Whiting?
yep,
Man, that's so close to the top of the US.
America's hat. So
yeah. I mean,
close
we
to
regularly
America's
hop
hat.
over to I play golf. I played golf last Friday on Campobello Island, which is a little Canadian island
Uh-huh.
right there.
Wait, is that this is gonna sound dumb. That's not no, Nova Scotia is
It's over there.
That's St. Andrews or St. John's or something. Got it.
Yeah, Nova Scotia is, I think, a little further northeast.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
your wife ended up getting a job in this area?
Mm-hmm. It's a very rural area, but there's a need for eye doctors, and we came out for a visit, and the weather was awful. It was like March and an ice storm. It was brutal, and I kind of talked her into it, saying like, "Hey, you got to be somewhere. Let's go here." Most of at the time, my family was still in New England, so it got us a little closer. She's from Illinois originally, so it got her about as far as she could go from Illinois, which that wasn't entirely by design. Um, but it was a good opportunity. Now she's fast forward 7 years. She's sole owner of a practice that has 2 locations. So
And is that in Whiting?
her offices are in Calais and Machias, which are like the two kind
Yeah.
of
Okay.
closest towns.
Because you're like, I'm gonna stop doing this in a minute, but I'm looking at the map. Whiting is there's not a lot going on.
There's
It's
500
big.
people in this town.
Yeah, it's there. It's like you can see everyone's house, and then Route 1 crosses through the middle of it, and then it's just trees.
Yeah, I live, if you need to get further out of the way, like my house is, I don't know, a mile and a half off Route 1 in the woods on this tiny little lake. So
That's cool.
it's neat up here. It's, there's a lot of things that you can have for space that you can't get other places, but
Mm.
as far as population and restaurants and shopping and things like that, there's not a whole lot to speak of.
Yeah,
So
you are close to Graham and Ann.
Yeah, I ran into Aaron over at JLC, and I was like, hey, you're really the closest guy I've seen on here, and you're in another country.
you guys should have carpooled.
I don't know how he would get here, because it's like the ferry. You have to go up to, I think it's St. Andrews, so like it's or something like that for me. So like it'd be I mean, he could have, if he got out over here to the States, could have, but like I think it's for me to get to Grand Manan unless I like take a boat over from that. I'd probably
Mm.
get in trouble with the Coast Guard. I think
True.
it's like 5 hours to get around there, even though it's within eyesight.
Yeah, it's wild. So you moved up there. Did you start your business right away?
No, I moved up here with kind of not really realizing the difference in job markets in other places. When I was back in Michigan, I was working for a builder developer. He had been around for a long time, and I was hired as a production manager for him. So I was doing the estimating, running the projects. Probably had 20 carpenters or so, building semi-custom homes. And oddly enough, before all this happened, he presented to me an idea of maybe buying his business. He wanted to retire, and kind of as things got rolling with that, other opportunities for my wife started showing up, and I was like, well, 9 years of college and a doctorate is probably worth the move. So I came out here kind of thinking like, well, hey, I'm how old was I? 20, I don't know, 26 at the time, 27. I got 2 degrees. I've got this experience. Who wouldn't want to hire me? And wasn't the hottest market out here. So
Mm.
when I moved out here, I ended up just working, put a tool belt on for a local carpenter for a little while, like being like his third guy, going from running work to just kind of being like almost a laborer. Um, and then I got an opportunity I worked at there's a semi-private school up here. It's been around for forever. And I was able to get hired on as their superintendent of buildings and grounds. So I was in charge of like their maintenance and their capital improvement projects, kind of capital planning for that. And didn't like it. It was just not for me. And then I kind of just, while I was working there, I started my business. I had worked for other builders. I've done other things. And I was like, that's what I want to get back doing. And at the time, there wasn't a ton of opportunity. So I said, well, let me start a business and go from there and see what I can build.
And how did you starting your business? Was it a carpentry business to begin with?
Yeah. So at my background, I have a degree in construction management from Northern Michigan University up there in the UP. And, but I've always worked, in the summers I'd labor. When in theory, technically I dropped out of college. I went to school in Newton for a semester and then dropped out and then worked back in Connecticut for a year to figure things out. And that's really when I got started in the industry. So when I wasn't at school, held a job in school, doing kind of handyman work. I worked for a family, like on their house, their businesses and things like that. Come back for the summer, work. and then always kind of been building. It seems like for the last, I don't know, 15 years anyway. And so when I started my business, I mean, granted, I was pushing paper for a couple years, but I was like, well, I'll get started. And my first job was redoing a deck, and I was like, oh,
Mhm.
that was fine. Get a helper when I need one, and then see where we can progress from there. But always tried to push like maybe more of the professional side of it to try to grow a business to be able to get those
Sure.
houses that I want to build and the renovations that we wanted.
Were you directly competing with a guy that you were working for prior?
No, he was really well established. He kind of runs a small operation, which is great, and he's got his own word of mouth market building,
Mm.
nice houses. And this area, you're pretty far, even though he's a handful of towns over, you're close enough but far enough where
Okay.
not really, especially at that time, not competition at all. Maybe now we probably get considered for some of the similar projects, but
How do how do you start? It seems to me it'd be so difficult to find work and start a business in such a small area that there's probably a lot of people who work on their homes themselves.
That's exactly what I want to know.
Yeah, and like also just seems to be a very rural area.
you're
Like, how do you
saying
get
that
your foot in the
starting a
door?
business in the
Yeah, like
poorest
how do you get
state
your
in the poorest county is
Is
interesting.
it
Yeah,
is
I
it
mean,
the
I've read that
forest?
it's like the third poorest county in Maine, or like the third least populous county in Maine, and it's like it just seems not a place that you would want to start a business, and you and your wife have started three.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
well, like her business was it's been around for. She's technically the third owner of it. There's two previous owners that we got here. They were on their way out. She kind of became a partner with somebody that had been there before, and then actually beginning of this year, the other partner has stepped away from ownership. She's still on working, and now my wife is sole owner of that practice. But um, for me, it's kind of it's odd because if now like right now this area is busy because it's affordable. And, you can see all the land, the coast. People are moving, especially with COVID. A lot of people moved up here blindly because they could go get a house on the ocean for $100,000, and how bad could it be?
I just got off Realtor.com. That's what I was quiet for the last like 5 minutes. I was looking at it.
um, yeah, for me, it was just more of I don't know. The market 5 years ago was completely different, but like there's still some building going on, and I guess you have your own um, like aspiration.
Defreeze.
He did.
You didn't.
Okay. I
Must be
just
cold.
I just moved
Cold.
my computer up and I was like, "Oh shoot."
I thought I saw you move. Let's see if he comes back. He's probably still talking.
I mean, that is he probably is.
No,
No,
everything
there
just
he
went
Hey,
goes.
he's
spiraling, so I didn't hear anything. I'm sorry.
No, that's
no,
okay.
yeah, you
You were in the
froze
middle of
for a
talking.
minute. You basically, Nick and I were asking, like right before you froze, you said that your wife had started her business and transferred ownerships of that stuff. That the market, 5 years ago was different than what it was, and there's always been building going on. And we were getting into how you start and get your foot in the door with the business in a very small populated. I don't know how to say that. Modestly populated area that doesn't have a ton of money.
Um, Working at that school was helpful. I also coached while I was there, so I was kind of involved in the community and some people. So people kind of, when I started my business, started to know who I was. Um, when I was working over at the Washington Academy as the school, I was coaching football over there. I was coaching basketball. Kind of out and about. I'm fairly sociable when it comes to like the networking side of things. And when I started my business, I kind of, well, I started it, and then there was another carpenter, and I was like, hey, well, if you need some help, I'll hop on with you, but I'm actively looking for work, as far as that goes. And if I land a project, well, we're in the middle of something, we can work something out. um, it sounds like I'm talking like I live in the 1970s. I put a little ad in the local paper, my little business advertisement, and made a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and first job was, like I said, a deck resurfacing, essentially tearing off a bunch of old nasty composite decking and put another some new stuff on, and that was the first job that kind of led to a couple other small tiny projects, and then landed a decent size like camp remodel like 2 hours from my house up to like even further north near Canada, for the people that own the local appliance store. And then that's kind of around like when COVID had people moving up here, and that's really kind of what opened up the market. Like I had, not that I had a huge portfolio, but we had put some quality work out there. I had a website, I had a Facebook page, I had an Instagram page. So if people were like looking things up, we were coming up. Whether or not we were the most established or the best at anything to be determined, but
That's a great point. Like in a saturated market, it's like there's an abundance of work, but there's also an abundance of people doing it. And it's like now, for me or for anyone that lives in like a more densely populated area, we're thinking about how do we strategically rank number one,
mhm,
like in Google, right? Where
right,
it's like you are the only number if you're if you're in your city. Where it's like there's less people, and not only that, but there's also less people that are going to take advantage of the marketing opportunities such as social media. So that's
right,
super smart. Like hats off to that. Like realizing that early on, because and then with people relocating there, it's like, yeah, the first thing I'm doing, we bought a place up in New Hampshire,
mhm,
and like we need to replace the roof. I'm on Google typing in like roof replacement, like in in our town,
right.
and I'm calling the first maybe one or two people. The first one that answers the phone gets the contract.
And and there's some guys that have been around for 30 years, but it's word of mouth. And I'm like, you know, I got a couple leads. They were like, "Hey, we Googled builders in the area, and you came up, and your website shows that you're capable of a couple things." So, our first big project were these people that moved up here from Washington D.C. They bought a house off of that cheap old houses Instagram page.
Yeah.
Some 160-year-old dump that was on the cove down in about an hour from my house, and they called me like, "Hey, we want to save this house. Can you do it for us?" I'll drive down there, and I mean, trees were growing out of it. It was a wreck, and I was dumb enough and early enough. But it's like, yeah, we can do that. What's your budget? Probably not enough, but like we'll do it anyway.
Yeah,
And like eight
figure it out.
months later, they were moving in. So it was good, and that's kind of what's propelled us to do some other work and kind of.
Yeah, you think he's on Starlink up there?
Just takes a long time to get down here.
Dang.
The signal. What if he's on Wi-Fi?
I just swear we do have internet out here. They
Did you
actually
hear
ran.
us?
They actually can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They actually ran fiber where I live. Of all places, there's two houses on like where I live on this little lake, and they
They
ran
ran
fiber.
it, but did they connect it?
I mean, it usually works. But I don't really do a lot of Zoom calls, so I apologize.
That's okay.
But what I was saying is, so a couple of those projects, kind of painfully learning what to actually run the business and how to take on work and how to not overextend ourselves and not piss too many people off. That's been the challenge as of late.
And you got an MBA also, not just a Bachelor of Science?
Yeah, when my wife was in optometry school, she was studying all the time, and we were actually living in Worcester, is where she went to optometry school, and I worked for a little, he's grown now, but he was a builder in Grafton, for a little while, and then it just, the pay wasn't there, so I kind of switched jobs I was doing more project management engineering for this company that was doing, like wastewater and sewer treatment plants for municipalities. And I was like, well, we're living in the city. She's always studying. I might as well maybe do something as well if we're stuck in the hustle and bustle, or if I want to go climb the corporate ladder somewhere. I thought the MBA might be a good idea.
Did it have anything to do with what you're doing now?
It was a focus in project management. So, I mean, a little bit, but a lot of that stuff I feel like you learn is really maybe only applicable to, bigger business.
Yeah.
So I kind of jokingly say, I got an MBA and just made less money ever since. But, it's it was worth it. I mean, it was fine to do it when I got another piece of paper shoved somewhere that says I accomplished something.
So how long have you been in business now? It's only been a few years?
5 years, just about
5 years.
5 years.
You got 2 more years until you start making any money.
Yeah, we've lost a bunch. I'll tell you that.
7 years seems to be the magic number.
It's,
Um,
it's it feels
so
like you're going and then you hit something and it starts. I don't know.
Oh, you rush down the hill and then you hit the bottom and you start climbing again. I made a post.
scarcity and
Yeah, I made a post yesterday about surfing, and I very much feel that way in business, where it's like you're up, you're on a high, you're riding the wave, and then you a wave crashes you down, and then you're underwater, and you have no idea when you're going to come up, and if you're going to survive, and if you can breathe, and you're being tossed around like you're in a washing machine.
I'm glad that's not just me, because
No,
that's where we're at right now. To be
yeah.
honest with
Well, you had reached out to us via email and talked about that, where it's your company, was much larger, you scaled, and then you scaled back.
you. Hmm.
Um, and you kind of mentioned it already in being strategic in growing your business, but why is that a topic that you're so interested in talking about?
Well, it's interesting. I think we all, like, when we start a business, you kind of envision what you're going to have,
Hmm.
based probably on either who you worked for or what you've been around. So in my mind, like, I'm going to come out here, I'm going to establish this business, I'm going to have 20 carpenters, I'm going to have this management team, we're going to do all this great work, and then the market, the location, the available talent, um, all plays a role in that. And I think sometimes, I know for myself, I'll accuse myself of being, a millennial that thinks, yeah, I want it and I want it now. I'll work for it, but if I work real hard, I'll get it quickly. And so for me, it was one of those things, like, with the area started with, projects started coming in, bigger projects like new home builds and large scale remodels. And we did a project in the middle of the town of Machias that got us some attention, both good and bad. Uh,
What was the bad?
well, long story short, we converted this old Italian Victorian home into a restaurant and brewery, and it was right in the center of town. So the town was kind of for it and against it, and we
Mm.
did some really good work. And then I ended up with a lien on it and a large amount of money owed to me. So yeah, it was a nice learning experience. So, but at the time, we're like, okay, well, we've got some other things in the hopper. We'll keep going. So we're still waiting on that. Um, but then as we got our name out there, I'm getting more people, applying, like, hey, I've got all this experience. I'd like to come join the team and see what we can build. And kind of, I think people kind of get excited about maybe a new business that's, I guess, at least to the eye, like, growing and doing some good things. So
Hmm.
people come on, we try to grow. I went out and bought, like, I thought we'd have 2 crews. So I went and bought another trailer, all that fitted out for the tools and everything. And then I realized that I'm just running around, not really getting anything done. Quality is slipping. My guys aren't happy. My clients aren't happy. I'm not happy. Then people start leaving for either more money or various reasons. Whether they were let go, or they wanted different responsibilities, or they wanted something else. So then it's like, okay, well, you can try to grow, but if you're going to grow and then take on this work based on what you have, you kind of have to make sure you have that team. Because if the team falls out and you're stuck with all this work, you're where I'm at right now with, it's me and 4 people, and we've got like 4 projects that we're trying to get done with all at the same time.
what do you attribute uh your inability to be successful in those previous years when you were bigger? Like, what's the biggest thing you would attribute that failure to? Like, that it just wasn't working out for you?
I mean, I no systems in place at all.
Yeah.
And me, uh, on one level, trying to do everything, but also probably handing things off too quickly. without a real plan in place. It's creating a lot of stress on like my crew and ultimately under delivering like in every aspect, like not being good enough for my crew, not being good enough for my clients, and kind of doing a lot but not doing anything particularly well.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like general business inexperience
Yeah.
with learning how to operate your bit. And that it's interesting because I mean, we spoke about this before, but with residential construction, there's no real standard. So the way that Nick runs his business isn't necessarily going to work for the way that I would run. I couldn't take Nick's systems and implement them into my market and make that work. Like some things would work, some things wouldn't. Everyone's learning on their own, and it is really difficult if you're trying to do nice work and get the right projects and produce a quality product to just grow and be able to do 2 projects at once, 3 projects at once, 4 at once. You have to let something slide, or you have to lower your standards, or you have to pay people a lot of money who are very good and want to be doing very good work, and a lot of times you're just not there early on in business.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, I mean, Tyler, what you just said, like that can be attributed to trades and subcontractors too, where I think a lot of times, especially with social media nowadays, when it's like we'll tag a subcontractor that we work with and they do a dynamite job, and then someone else hires them, they're like, dude, they sucked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's like, but
exactly.
yeah, but what, like, you know, it just because they're good for me doesn't mean they're good everywhere. And it's the same thing with hiring employees. I've learned that the hard way too, and I continue to struggle with it. Where it's like just because someone comes in and has a ton of experience, like it doesn't matter. There's still like the part I need to implement with them and give them something to follow. Like the best project manager could come on my lap, come into the business. I almost say come on my lap, which sounds terrible, but come into my business. And I'm not sure why I even pointed that out. But into my business, and then
Into my lap.
but but God, Doug's gonna make a clip out of that. Into the business, right? And not perform, and early on it's really frustrating as like a business owner. It's like you're supposed to have all this experience, like why can't you run the job? It's like, well, I don't know how you want me to run the job. What's a project manager for NS Builders? What's a project manager for Pine State? Like what we need to be part of that process and developing the system, so when someone does come into to the business, they understand the playbook.
Right.
And I know we've talked about that, and like we beat ourselves, you know, in the head with that like we need process, we need process, we need processes. It's something that like we will talk about till the business is over. It's just always refining that, but it's also a really difficult balance between you know giving them enough information but not too much,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like you give them too much and then there's no creativity. It's like I do A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E. It's like, wait, no, I need you to do F. It's like, that's not in the list.
Right.
It's like, okay, so I'll add F. It's like A, B, C, D, E, F. And it's like, well, why aren't you dipping into G? And it just goes on and on, where it's like, I sit down with my operations manager and we review this stuff and write it. And I try to get super granular. And it's the same thing with like example, like our handbook. My lawyer's like drafting this up, and she was like, Nick, this is way too specific. I'm like, way too. I thought that was the goal.
And most things in life you want to be very
Right.
specific. But I
They're
guess
like,
you want to be
no,
vague
no,
in
you need to
others.
be vague because you're gonna get in trouble. It's like, I'm like, in trouble. They're like, yeah, you're so specific in this criteria that if someone wavers, it's like then they can whatever. I'm going on a tangent, but the point is like as a business owner, like when you're scaling, our mindset says let's collect the best people, and that's it.
Right.
Just collect all the best people and let them do their thing. It's like that could work if they all want to run their own business. but not be part of a team.
So, Jason, when you emailed us, it was back in November. So at this point, 6-7 months ago, and you were at 7 people, down from 12, and you said you're what, 4 or 5 now?
Currently 6. I have myself, 4 guys in the field, and we have an in-house design client manager that I brought on about a year ago.
So what has improved? I want to talk about what has improved for you by downsizing, and also what's been more difficult.
I don't know if anything's necessarily improved yet. I think it's offered clarity on what size team we can function better in. The challenge has been now that we have fewer people, and we're trying to finish the work that we already had. So that's been a challenge, and that's in good way and a bad way. It's allowed me to reach out to a few subcontractors that I haven't worked with in the past to help push things through. And there's not a huge subcontractor base up here, which you could probably make that assumption. But I would say with a smaller team, it's allowed for some more transparency, a little more input from them on what everyone wants to kind of have moving forward, and helping kind of make a clear goal of where we're headed. Because what we're trying to do, and what we've kind of strayed away from, I've always wanted to build quality projects. Even if we had like 2 teams, I didn't want to do 30 projects a year. I'd like to have a crew on one job, like build a whole house entirely, quality home, and then go to the next one, not have 15 jobs going on at once. The reality of that is challenging with 2 teams, but we're kind of moving forward with the smaller team that we've got some very good work coming up, higher dollar value, longer schedule, more complex work, so we can just all as a team kind of dial in on one job, focus on that one project, and maybe have the next one, like currently, like we have a house coming up. It's a 260-year-old house that I got shipped up here from Cape Cod for these people in Long Island. It's in pieces in a 42-foot trailer. We're going to put that together with an addition. And then
Sounds like a nightmare.
It might be. Yeah.
You were just so casual about that.
Well, we've been in. To me. Well, I've been working with these people for like 3 years, so it feels like it's a normal thing. But every time I bring it up, it's crazy, and I'm like, well, it is kind of neat. But so that's our next big.
What kind of pieces are they in?
It's in a 42-foot semi truck trailer.
Yeah.
When you open the back, it just looks like a bunch of old wood with a doghouse dormer that's still intact. It's they had a demo.
Did they cut it into panels, or
they had a demo contractor. It's like a historical restoration demo contractor. Take it apart piece by piece, tag and catalog it, and I have essentially hand-drawn drawings and a catalog of all the parts and pieces to put it back together.
Probably not all the parts and pieces, if I had to guess.
And I'm sure some things are probably rotten by now.
Okay, so not to make this all about this project, but how are you? Is that just time and material to put it back together?
Yeah, so we looked at it, and I think it's good. The client's, she's an architect and he's a real estate broker, so they're involved regularly in the construction process. And I was like, I don't know how to put a price to this. Like, I'm going to make the assumption that once we get it all scattered out, like it'll take longer than building a regular home, but I can at least maybe ballpark some time frame. So we kind of have a working budget, like, hey, let's try to aim to be around this price point, and I'll just send you an invoice every month, and we'll see where we're at.
Okay.
And then, oddly enough, like a quarter mile up the road, we're in the pre-construction phase for a more modern home for a guy that's moving out here from California. So that's in the schematic design budget phase.
How much are you guys actually subcontracting? Like, what trades do you subcontract?
We sub our groundwork, concrete, and then plumbing, electrical. I try to sub most of our drywall, maybe roofs, but everything else is self-perform. there's no specialty trim contractor. There's no specialty. I mean, you can get a vinyl siding guy if you want to, but it's a challenge up here because it's everyone. You have to kind of do everything.
Yeah, I feel that would be good and bad. It would be good in many senses where you always have work for people if you have bigger jobs going on, but at the same time you have to carry a higher overhead and ensure that you have jobs for people to keep them busy. Um and I'm sure finding people that can self-perform all of those different trades gets to be pretty difficult. Um and I'm sure that that doesn't help with the entire learning curve of starting a business and everything else. I was on your website and you have a pretty comprehensive pre-construction process and construction phase process. How did you end up developing that?
Um, some of it is the company that I worked for in Michigan. Um, they'd been around since the early 70s, and their systems were good. We would build, granted, there was a little timing of things were different, but we would build a semi-custom home. The day we broke ground, it would be about 20 weeks
Damn.
Done?
done.
Wow.
They weren't elaborate homes. There weren't,
Still I mean, regardless, it's still fast. How
yeah.
big?
And
How big? How
when I
big
went
of a
up
home?
there, ranging from like single level, three, probably. I'm trying to think. The one, actually, we built like 5 houses that year. It ranged from 1,500 to 3,000 if you're going like a two-story home.
Yeah.
But nothing super complicated. They weren't like real ornate, but they had some nice architectural details. Custom tile shower, little things like that. The price point were kind of plug and play, but they weren't super custom, and a lot of them were maybe a modified. We'd spend time in the winter kind of creating a series of floor plans because he developed. There was a builder, and also he had 3 or 4 neighborhoods he developed, and so we'd spend some time in the winter like creating 6 floor plans, 8 floor plans, and then if someone wanted to modify one, we'd do that. Or if they start from scratch, we would do that. So it was a very aggressive build schedule, but over his time of 70 years of building or whatever it was, not quite 70 years, but he had a lot of systems in place. He had a team in place. So I took a lot of the stuff from there, um, and it's on there, and we've implemented maybe maybe a third of what I have on there, what we want to implement, because it's been very challenging, as you guys know, starting a business, trying to develop systems, implement systems, work those systems, get the work done itself. You feel like you're never really getting anywhere with that side of it.
If
Yeah,
it,
that
if you could attribute one, like, what was the one thing that made that 20-week schedule work?
I mean, everything was planned ahead of time. I mean, there was
Like,
nothing in question before
when
we
you
broke
say
ground.
planned, right? So let's talk mechanicals. You obviously have a set of blueprints.
Everything was specced out. Everything was designed. Everything was
So
estimated.
ductwork guy, his ductwork was fabricated. Like, he knew exactly where he was going before he showed up.
Yep.
Plumbing, he knew exactly how much linear foot of PVC pipe he needed.
Yep.
And that was with your team. Like, you guys were doing that?
Well, yeah. So it would be we had in-house design, and I would do kind of the nuts and bolts part of it, right in spec for the build. If we need something engineered, sometimes it'd be sent over to get designed, the mechanicals and things like that, and then that would be integrated into the build schedule, what we need, if there's anything that need to be changed for that. And then a lot of things that went up for spec, like we would have decided on, like with the client manager, myself working with the client, windows, siding, roofing, floor, everything was selected, decided, and pretty well like, all right, this is how it's going to be. There's no changes. If there's a change, here's where it's going to, this is what it's going to cost you. So when you started, you had everything was built essentially on paper in a book, and it made my job running the projects easy because I would just, if I needed my first floor delivery, I would just call my sales rep and say, send the first floor, send the trusses, because he already knew everything. We already had that set up. subs were already lined up and they knew our aggressive build schedule.
When you say they knew it, like obviously they're signing a contract, you're
Yep.
agreeing to it. But what were the things that you had to do to get their buy-in for that?
My time there, it was a lot of it was kind of, I would say, loyalty based, like using the same plumbing company. You get bids. We try to get 2 or 3 quotes per each one, but we knew which one we'd like to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And when they know they have 5 houses in the hopper for you, like
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna work. And if especially they know that, hey, it's gonna be 5 in a row. It's not gonna be like maybe five. Oh, that one got delayed, 12 weeks,
Yeah,
and this one fell through.
you're building incentive.
Yeah, and then we had a pretty big team as far as field crew went. So you could, when you needed to really overman a job, so you want to go roof that house. We did pretty much everything in house, and you could have 8 guys over there to get that thing knocked out in a day and done.
Mm-hmm.
Where in other spots, it's not the case.
Yeah, so essentially you had runway, like multiple runways. So guys would show up, maybe they're thinking they're doing something, and for whatever reason, it's like, hey, change of plan, go roof that house over there.
Yeah, yeah, we had 20 something guys. The way we were operating, I had, I think, three lead carpenters, and we probably had roughly 15 to 20 carpenters and capable people with a couple laborers. So like you could pull off, if you were, in a framing phase on another project, and you could steal 2 guys to help with the roof over there. It worked out pretty well. And then we subbed out a couple things. Our vinyl siding, or the siding was generally subbed out. Tile work was subbed out. So you had, and there's a different sub base there, and it's a smaller area that was busier, so there was available. Your electricians had a crew of electricians, not like an owner operator with maybe a helper.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with like plumbing and heating and things like that.
How hard has it been for you? I know you touched on this a little bit, but how hard and how difficult has it been for you to try and implement your goal for this pre-construction and the construction process? Because it would, in my mind, being that you are where you are, you're a newly established business. It's not like you're in a metropolitan area where people are like, yeah, a lot of people work this way. I would assume that most local people don't work this way or want to be working this way. And then you come in and it's like, hey, we're looking to shake things and put them on their head and operate in a way that's different than most everyone else. Have you had a lot of pushback to that?
I've had a little bit, as far as mostly like, oh, hey, it's more expensive because, we're spending more time on it. To be honest, the next 2 projects are the first time we've really implemented. Like I have a pre-construction agreement
Yeah.
where it's signed, they've paid, we're working on a schedule, transitioning into the contract phase. And those, the 2 projects right now are in their very early stages, but they're already more comfortable. It's helped establish better expectations from the start, because that's always something I've been struggling with. Like everyone's all excited to sign a contract, build a house, do this project, and then they want you there the next, the day you sign the contract. I'm like, oh, I'm actually 3 months out, and then people are unhappy by the time you start, and that's been a problem of mine, of not laying out those expectations ahead of time, and then trying to make up for it throughout the project. And it doesn't do anyone any favors. It just stresses me out, it stresses my crew out, it stresses the homeowners out. So that's something that I'm trying to actively stop doing. But you kind of wear so many hats. You get excited as the business owner too to land that new job, or you really like the clients and you want to come through for them, and you're over promising when you shouldn't be, and it just leads to problems down the road.
Is most of your work from people who have relocated rather than like people who are originally from that area?
More currently, yes, it's for people that relocated. Like I think everything that I've been working on lately, we're in the middle of a home build right now. They moved back. They were local. They were in the Philadelphia area for a while and then moved back. And then everyone else that we're building for is not local. They're either different states or different countries at the moment.
Yeah. Do you think that what you're seeing right now and what you've seen for the past year, as far as the market goes and the builds that you're lining up, is that something that's going to be sustainable? Or is this something that you feel is just like a temporary blip in the market and it'll stabilize? I guess the bigger question is, for the future, do you see things progressing closer to where you want to be, or is this about as good as it gets for you?
I mean, I think like anywhere else, the market's eventually going to level out. I think to our advantage is the area compared to the rest of New England, and pretty much is way more affordable.
Yeah.
So there's a large like secondary home market up here. A lot of people from Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, they have spots up here or land up here, and I don't think that'll slow down. And that's, I think, for us trying to establish ourselves to get some of the higher end work and prove that we can do it is kind of where it'll help us maintain where we want to be.
Yeah. What the people who are moving up there, if it's secondary homes, how are they, like, why are they going to this area versus other areas of Maine that are somewhat more developed at this point?
I mean, I know during COVID, a lot of people were like, it seemed like they were flocking up here because you had space, you had fresh air, you had, you could buy, you know, 50 acres for 30 grand.
Yeah.
Um, you can buy oceanfront property still and not spend millions of dollars on it. And the area is, I mean, it's behind, but it's pushing to establish itself as like a remote work area, and that's what we've seen quite a bit of. That people were able to leave, Washington D.C. and work remotely, or move from California and work remotely. Um, I mean, from the outside, I think most people would like rather live near, Bar Harbor or Portland or something like that, where you have easier access to, the city and the amenities. Like up here, I'm a 4 hour drive to Portland.
Yeah. It's just an interesting place for people to be heading, where I don't feel like that much of Maine is that populated.
No.
Um, but it's interesting to see what the market will level out to, because I would assume that most of your customers, being the way that you want to be doing things in the process that you're looking to refine and develop, aren't necessarily going to be people who, yeah, like, I was born and raised here, I lived here forever, because I would assume that they have a local network that they have tapped into for years and years, and you're a new name in town, and it's very easy for somebody to look up and find you, whether you're on social or on the internet, where all those word of mouth contractors aren't necessarily marketing themselves the same way. So I think that you are obviously giving yourself a benefit to new projects and people who are looking to relocate. And if you could keep pushing that to kind of see what type of vacation homes and secondary homes you guys can be building up there, because it seems that that would be the go-to and the opportunity for you to be doing the type of work that you want to be doing.
Mm-hmm. And it's different in the sense that some people from away, the model that I like to work on, the slower pace, the pre-construction, working with an architect, getting everything planned out, is the way it's done in a lot of other places.
Mm-hmm.
Where up here there's no builder's license requirements. There's no building inspections. You pull a permit, it might cost you. I think the most expensive permit I pulled is cost me $180. Um, and there's no code enforcement. There's none of that, so it scares some people from away that are like, oh, hey, where's the architect? Where's the engineering? Where's the building? Where's the code enforcement? So for me, it's kind of a benefit too that now we're saying, like, what, if you're especially a new home, like we built one house that was designed by the lumber yard, and it was a mistake.
Yeah.
Just looking at engineering, and it still causes problems, and it's too much liability and too much guesswork on our end to make things meet, where it's like moving forward, like if you want us to build a house and you show up with this drawing from the lumber yard, great. Well, let's take it to an architect and get it designed and stamped and engineered, so we're not making assumptions in the field. And that's going to cost you something. And if that doesn't work for you, then find somebody that'll build on that plan. I'm just not going to do it anymore.
How do they not have any even just plan review?
Um, well, what's interesting is, I guess in theory they do, but it's so unofficial. Like for example, like for a building permit, typically you have your application, whatever, and then you're supposed to supply some sort of drawings for the planning board. And I've pulled a permit for example, that 260-year-old house. I just had some sketches saying, "Hey, this is what we're going to build, and this is what it is, and here's your permit." All they really want to see is that your septic is designed appropriately for the amount of bedrooms and stuff that you're putting in the house, and there's very little regulation. And part of it is, I mean, when you're only paying $100 for a permit, like it's not supporting a code enforcement office to do anything. And
Yeah.
I always compare. I'm sure it's changed. When I was building down in Massachusetts 10 years ago, like I think there was like 13 inspections before the first piece of wood was flying on it, on the
Oh
site.
yeah.
Between your groundwork and your footings and your foundation, your backfill, everything else, and then you actually had regulation, and you had a certificate of occupancy. And we've run into that with a couple projects with funding, from banks or from people that are they got a bank from California, and like, oh, can you send us your builder's license and we'll need to close this out, your certificate of occupancy. I'm like, none of that exists. So it's very strange.
That I don't know who that's serving, right? I mean, the the township municipalities don't have to keep somebody on board, and it's not saying that the builders are going to build the design, but at least you're starting off with some sort of basis that, like,
Right.
yeah, this is structurally feasible. I mean, I know what I pull apart down here where there are plan review and there's code review and there's inspections, and it's still super bad. I can't imagine what some people are doing when there's just like nothing in place.
Yeah, and I would say it's probably worse up here. I mean, like some cities have their own, enforcement, like Portland, for example, and the surrounding towns, like they have different code enforcement building departments, but up here there's none of it. And I find it strange. I've held a builder's license in Connecticut and some other states and I didn't even know my own business. And like around here, the electricians and the plumbers have a state license. The electricians sign off on their own work. Pretty much they put their license on the line if something went wrong, but that's the inspection. They sign off on their own.
Not even peer review, just like, yep,
Nope.
what I did is good.
Yep.
So when it comes to people calling you and wanting work done, how is it you turning down a lot of jobs? Is it really difficult to land leads or get to the bottom and vet leads adequately when there really is no apples to apples, or you don't know what you're bidding against, right? Because it's even where we are, if you were bidding against somebody, you're at least bidding it that, like, yeah, this is going to be done to a code minimum. And it would
Right.
seem that in your market, that's not necessarily the case. You could be doing things wildly different, even more so, like even more polarizing than we are. When people get a hold of you to do a project, how are you handling that with potential customers?
I would say prior to wanting to implement these systems and stuff, it was a lot more difficult. And like the smaller projects, like, we got into ourselves in a couple, like a remodeling project. They wanted a second floor put on their house. And I sketched up something like, yeah, we can build that. Work, you got the building permit from the town. And like, I don't even know how you would have bid that. There was no design. It's like, yeah, we can sketch something for you and put a second floor on your home. Now, I mean, we've had enough work right now to keep us busier than we probably want to be. and we've got backlog work that I haven't had to bid, where they've come to us, we've kind of vetted them, they've got some information, like, for our next big project, they kind of had the information, they weren't taking bids. They had spoken to somebody that highly recommended us. We had a meeting on site. Everything went well. We communicated a handful of times before we got to contract. And, so I wasn't bidding that. This and the other new build that's in the schematic budget design right now, they contacted me via Instagram, and we started working with an architect together. He came out here once from California, walked the property, and signed a pre-construction agreement to start working through it. I think the projects that people don't want to invest in, the pre-construction, the planning for it, I'm not really interested in bidding it, because you're putting yourself out there, and it's, as you guys know, it's already risky enough just being in this business when there are rules and plans and everything else. To go into something without clear plans is pretty dangerous,
Right.
as far as your liability.
I mean, I guess it comes down to who the builder is too, right? Because I'm thinking of this right now from my own perspective, and I'm like, damn, my life would be so much easier if I didn't have permits and inspections. But like, I don't think that my projects would really be any different. Like, I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm not getting this inspected, I don't need that. But
No, you'd shave a week or two off your schedule,
Right.
and that's it.
Oh yeah, but even just like waiting on stuff, right? Like, I had the engineer at the job, and now I need to wait for the engineer to size things properly in order to get them back, and wait for those submittals. And like, you could just there wouldn't be hangups. You could just do stuff where it's like, yeah, the electrician knows how to fix this. I don't need to do an as built for this. I could just keep moving forward, just from like a progress perspective. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to take shortcuts, but obviously that's me, and I'm not everyone else. But I could see a lot of people. I mean, I guess there's a lot of people who just build as if there's no inspections anyway, because they don't pull permits. So
Right. And I think, in theory, like, permits and the building standard supposed to be a minimum. And, obviously, and everywhere there's people that, skimp on everything, or don't do things correctly, cover things up. But, but at the same time, like, where you could probably determine, if you had to add some structural things, you could go to your span chart and say, hey, I need this size LVL to span this, good enough. And we can do that here, instead of having to go through all that. But unfortunately, you get some people like, oh, well, double up a 2x6, let it span 14 feet, it'll be good enough for as long as I'm here, and cover it up. And
drywall hold it.
right, where where there is regulation, where it pretty much halts work, where something has to be designed, and something has to be submitted on, and something has to be approved. For me, thinking like, if I'm a homeowner, so that's what I would want, to make sure whatever is going in there is appropriate, and that maybe, there's some follow up to make sure that builder put what was supposed to be in there. But
Yeah, I mean, my like current job is a perfect testament to what happens when people don't pull permits, and just how wrong everything can be. And that not everyone does business on the up and up. And I don't know if that, obviously you're not going to pass inspections if things aren't done correctly, but I think just certain people are going to be doing things a certain way. Like, if I didn't have inspections, I would still be trying to do a high level of work. It wouldn't just be like, oh, I'm not getting this inspected. Like, you don't need joist hangers, don't worry about it. Nobody's going to see it. But it's crazy to think that to work, I feel like that would present a lot of challenges when you are in the type of field or industry where you need to be competitively bidding jobs, because it's like, what the hell am I actually bidding against?
Right.
And like, I hear there's no I mean, I don't know how it works, the license requirements in New Jersey. Massachusetts, I'm sure it's still the construction supervisor license, and classes and tests and money and all that. Like, out here, there's no license requirements, so you get a lot. It's the ongoing joke. They'll call them, clamor with the hammer. Like, fish, the lobsters aren't good, or the price of whatever's not good. They'll throw a magnet on my truck, and I'll go build decks that'll fall over. I'll be a roofer today, or I'll do anything. So it's the range of, we get a phone call occasionally looking for, square foot price for a new home. And I don't particularly like coming up with square foot pricing for homes. There's so many variables, but we've done enough now. We can kind of figure out, okay, like this is the range that we need to be in based on the finishes that we want to put in, and what we can do. And I've gotten a couple calls where like, oh yeah, I've got a call. It's $150 a square foot to build this house, and I'm like, 1980 maybe.
Yeah.
Even up here, we're still between $300 and $600 a square foot for a decent home.
Yeah. I mean, that's
it's
more than I thought you were going to say, to be honest. But most of the guys around here are going to be like even probably on the lower end, that 300, but 600.
But they're also probably building a little bit smaller houses. Like,
Yeah.
what would that be for what square footage a house? Not like a monster house, right?
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, we're trying to think. The
Yeah.
last house I just sent the revised budget for, finished living space is like 3,400 square feet, and
Yeah, decent size.
we're at 400 and change or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all depending on finishes and things like that. And like the other thing up here is with the busyness is like people are actually paying their employees a little bit now, and you have to, if you want to keep them around. I came out here with a couple degrees in experience, and I was making under $15 an hour to swing a hammer for somebody, and you couldn't get anyone to do anything for that now. So
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that, where you're finding employees and like who you're hiring.
The people that I have, we've had, early on, we had quite a bit of turnover. People come and go, either not fitting what we want to do, or move, people moving away, opportunities, whatever. I've got one guy that's been with me for just about 3 years, and we were both kind of working part-time ish for another carpenter builder together, and I started to get busy and said, hey, if you want good full-time work, come on board. My most recent hire was, we've been talking. He had run his own business for about 15 years as kind of an owner operator, and doesn't like wearing both hats. So we had a long conversation for him to come on board and kind of be the lead carpenter on the crew. So that's new. That's a few months old. So kind of being creative to find talented people. But out here, even with where we are, you have to pay them appropriately to make it worth their while.
So what are most of the young kids who are getting done school going to do after they get done?
Out here, it's mixed bag, where it's a big lobster fishing community. So there's a fair amount that just hop on dad's boat and make a run at that life. I'd say a majority of them, growing up in a small town, want to go to college and move away. You see that a lot, where they're going off to college anywhere to go away because they want different experiences in life, city life,
Yeah.
or change of scenery. So that seems to be really the two major things. There's a community college that's up in Calais, and they dropped the building program, I think, the year I moved here. So I think really the strongest, like, furthering education for like the building world, I think, is still over in Bangor at, I think it's Eastern Maine Community College, if I recall correctly. I think he was under. He had, I think Ben Morton.
Yep.
Was
Yeah,
on
yeah.
I think he's a part of that. Went through that program a while back, and I think that's still a pretty strong program. But that's still 2 hours from here, and pulls people away from the area, because they can likely go to school out there and then go work for a bigger builder or whatever out in that area, or towards the city, or Bar Harbor, where there's no shortage of multi-million-dollar homes being built.
Yeah. What was the conversation like with the new guy that you brought on that had his own business? You said that he didn't like running his business. So like, what was that conversation? Like, what did you feel you could provide him as far as compensation and um, job description that's going to absolve him of that responsibility of owning a business?
Well, we kind of had a mutual conversation where we had a couple beers and we were chatting, and we were both fairly tired of wearing both hats because it's a never-ending 7-day job where you're got the bags on, you're dealing with the client, you're doing your budgeting, you're doing your invoicing, you're doing all the work, you're doing all the ordering, um, and and he's a very talented guy. So we started chatting, and I was like, I don't have, like, I didn't grow up being a carpenter my whole life. I can hold my own on a lot of things, but I'm not the best at everything by any means. And I also find myself, if I am currently, like, if I'm the guy, like, in charge, the lead guy, my phone doesn't stop ringing and I'm the choking point to production. So I kind of prefer not to be the guy that's controlling everything on the job site on the day to day, where if I can be there and I'll frame up walls, tilt up walls, I'll do whatever I need to do. But if I need to take a call or if I have a meeting set up, I don't want business to necessarily halt production.
Yeah.
So that was a conversation that we had where, it frees me up to be able to focus more time on the business, if that lead comes in, spend some actual time on it rather than like, I'll get around to it, Sunday night maybe and drop the ball somewhere. But kind of spread the weight of like, hey, if in the field, like, why don't we've got 3 or 4 guys, like, let's come up with a schedule for the week or work our schedule. You want to take the lead and you're telling me what to do, what we need to do for production. Great. That takes a certain level of responsibility off my day to day, to be able to hopefully run the business a little better and the field better. And
So,
that's an appeal to him to be able to just run work rather than run the business.
so was the goal to be closer to like a partnership than bringing in just an employee? Like it sounds as if you are looking to peel back your on the belt and the hands-on experience, and then bring somebody in who can handle more of that. Were you looking at it more from like a long-term partnership relationship that's going to keep you where you want to be, and help him out at the same time, more so than just bringing in another set of hands as like a carpenter?
Yeah, yeah, not maybe not like an actual
Sure.
partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way, because I think the way we want to be is to be a small operation, so we can weather whatever the economy may bring to the industry. And having a 4-person, 5-person operation isn't a ton of overhead, and it keeps overhead down if I'm still in the field, bags on. Management fees are a little less. You're not. It's kind of different management when you're already on the job site and your plumbers and electricians are there and you're helping put things together, coordinate. But it would allow for one, better quality work. He's a very talented carpenter, so he can teach. We're all fairly young. I'm 35. My rest of my crew's in their early 30s, and he's the old man at 41, I think he is. So we don't have, the grizzly 70-year-old that's showing us all the tricks and tips to get things done. So on 2 levels, help increase the quality and knowledge base, but also help, be better in the field. If I can hand some of that over, and then I can be better on the business end by, even being able to say like, hey, Fridays, it's got to be an office day so I can wrap things up. And that's something that we haven't done. When I had more employees, my biggest mistake with that was kind of letting go too quickly, in my opinion. Like, oh, I've got all these people in the field, I'm paying all this money in payroll, let me just go run the business. And then without clear schedules, clear roles and responsibilities, it was chaos. And we lost a couple good people because of it. And
So beyond reducing, like when you think about having these team members, like having this specific guy, like what are you doing to measure that accountability? Or is that still a work in progress?
like his accountability
Yeah, I mean his accountability and the rest and the rest of your team. Like thinking about growing too quickly and not having roles and responsibilities and being able to measure success of one's role. Like what has changed?
That's a little bit still of a work in progress. We had a team meeting on Friday saying like, all right, we've operated in a sense without like a clear schedule on projects because we've been spread so thin. So like, let's at least at the very least, we know when we want to finish projects. Let's start setting up some weekly goals, because that's been a little bit of a disconnect in my mind, the way I put a job together, a schedule together. If we fall short, I'm irritated by it, and then it's, oh well, there was an unrealistic goal, and it's like, all right, we missed each other somewhere in that. So a little more, um, group effort on putting that stuff together so we can all be held accountable. But it's not just on me creating something, and if it doesn't work out, we're looking at each other, but why the hell not? It's your fault, it's my fault, rather than, hey, here's some accountability. We all agreed, like, we're going to get, this is what time we want to allocate to this phase. Let's push forward through it, and then if we fall short or we exceed it, great. But now there's some accountability on that. It's not just me creating the schedule or the expectations, because on the other side of that is, as a new company that's kind of changed quite a bit in the last couple of years, kind of up and down, is it's not a whole lot of historical data to base on what our crew's even capable of doing.
Right.
So that's been a little bit of a challenge. I'll look at something like, oh man, we're pretty good. We'll knock that out in a couple of days, and it's like, oh, that's, now it's taken 2 weeks, and now I got to communicate to the clients that we're behind the schedule, that the expectations that I gave them that weren't really founded on solid information, and that's something that is been a thorn in our operation that we're really trying to clean up.
So what do you think moving forward? What's your ideal build? Like, you want to be doing full construction from foundation to roof, and less remodels or less light commercial? Is that the sweet spot that you're looking to hit?
That's where I'd like to be. That's what I enjoy the most, and that's our projects moving forward. That we have coming up are full builds, and then some longer leads. Are full builds. I like full scale remodels, but they have to be, for us to be effective and for us to be profitable and for us to be, everyone to be happy. It's got to be, one that's the homeowner can move out and we can just have the house and get things done. I've I mean, it's probably on our end, I'm sure, is we've struggled on some of these renovation projects where the homeowners are there and it takes forever, which I think is the case for most remodels. Like, it takes longer than, maybe than what most people would think, because you're constantly picking up, you're constantly cleaning, you're constantly redoing protection of the space, you're constantly, homeowners eating up hours of your day because they want to chat with you while you're on site. We haven't been overly effective in that. We take on a whole remodel if they have some place to stay till we're done. But
so what are you putting into place now and in the future to ensure that you're getting an adequate amount of leads and landing those type of projects? Have you given any thought to that?
Currently, it's been some word of mouth stuff. Like, with what we have under contract, like we're booked up for 2 years right now.
That's awesome.
It's given us a little bit of a chance to breathe, to really start working on those systems. Like, all right, how do we vet good leads? How do we make sure the projects that are coming in are worth the time to go look at? And I think implementing some of those pre-construction things, the pre-construction agreement, so the client is invested in us. They're paying a fee for us to assist with the design, come up with budgets, work with our subs to come up with budgets on their end to be able to get to their project together. And those are the projects that I feel like will be best for us and better for everyone when you have that time invested and some money invested in the planning end, because usually when there's some money involved, people take it serious.
Yeah. I mean, Nick, how I don't know if it's just like romanticism or what, but it would be pretty sweet to just have a handful, a small team to just build one house after another.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I think about that on a regular basis. But the other side of me is, I would say that that's probably a thought I think about once a month. But
Yeah.
29 days out of the month, I'm thinking about, like, I love the fact that we're going to be building multiple homes at a time. Um, but the biggest challenge, and I think the reason I have that one thought, is the people.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't like my people. It's not that I don't want them on my team. It's that I think I struggle with being a good leader and setting the example of, like, this is the standard. And truth, like, I'll speak truthfully, like right now I'm struggling with it, where I have been I have been having a very difficult time not just jumping in saying this is wrong, let's fix it, and trying to take a step back and trying to get them to get to the conclusion of, hey, this is wrong, I need to fix it.
Mm.
And it's been a very, like, real conversation where they're not, I mean, I'll say it for everyone that's listening. We're doing a good job. And to the majority of people that would walk one of our jobs, in process or when it's done, they would say this is an amazing project. There's no doubt. Like, my team does a good job. But I don't want to do a good job. I want to do a great job. I want to do, like, an insane job. I want to be number one. And I want and it's all of those little things that I continue to trip over, where it's like, shit, like, how do I get this person to know without me being here? And it's not because I don't want to just, call attention to it. It's that I know that as we grow, it will be hard for me to be everywhere and catch all of these things. And, and I'm sure it's the same, where it's like, as you scaled, like you said, like, as you scaled, you started, stuff started slipping.
Mm.
And a lot of it had to do with process, but it was also a lot of it probably had to do with the fact that you just couldn't be everywhere. And if you
Yeah.
and if you could be, if the only thing you were responsible to do was to drive from job to job to job every single day, you probably would have been fine. Like, you would have made forward momentum with everyone. There would have been a learning process, but at least everyone would have been taking a step forward every day.
Yeah.
Instead, it's, you grow and you jump to the thing that's calling your attention the most, while you think that over here everything is going smoothly, and then you show up and you're like, shit, like, I got to undo 2 weeks worth of work, or I got to accept the fact that this isn't up to my standard.
But don't you think that a lot of those challenges are presented because it's a management based company, like rather than performing
Totally.
that work in house? That, like, to have a small team of 6, 7 people where you're handling everything and everyone's on site every day and you're immersed in the work and you can't do X trade until you do this trade and you've already thought through those details. I mean, there's still going to be more detail oriented people than other people and people who are in it more. But I do find it, I mean, I struggle with it and still struggle with it. If I'm not doing the work,
Mhm.
how does it get done? Like, how do I not forget things? How do things not slip through the cracks? Because when I'm doing the work, and what I've realized is, just like when I have subs, I have to approach that project as if I'm doing the electrical work, as if
Right.
I'm doing the plumbing work, and I need to walk through every single step of that project except for actually running the pipes, running the conduit, running the
And that,
electrical, like,
but
even to the point where, like, I'll set boxes
sure.
on
And but
projects.
that's what you should be doing. And I think it's similar to, like, the mill workshop, where it's like, I'm utilizing a CNC to do the tasks that are monotonous. Now, let me be very clear here, because I don't want to say this incorrectly. I'm not saying I only want our trades to do the monotonous stuff and let me handle the difficult because I'm better at it. What I'm saying is that, all right, yeah, I'm speaking as though I'm, like, someone managing a job, which I don't. But if I'm managing the job, yes, Tyler, I'm with you. I'm going to set boxes. I'm going to lay out I'm going to snap a line on all the studs and say, hey, drill a hole here for your Romex. I want your Romex to be flat. Like, be the micromanager. But what you're doing is you're setting the expectation of, like, this is how I want to run the job. Now, ultimately, that's a training exercise. So when you build the second home, the third home, the fourth home, they know
Right.
you're not snapping lines anymore. They know that you want their Romex running through the wall. I'll give you an example. A couple weeks ago, actually way more than a couple weeks ago at this point, but I'm walking through the job and I come around the corner and we have the shear wall. So a shear wall in one of our homes is just this plywood interior wall, and there's a giant hole hacked out of it, like Sawzall, like that thing got destroyed. And I was like, what the F is that? And they were like, oh, the electric panel's going there. I'm like, so? And they're like, well, they had to make clearance for it. It's like, okay, so expectation wasn't set. When you cut a hole, make it look like a robot did it.
Yeah, make it
And
look.
yeah, and just clean, like you're doing and they're like, it gets covered up. I'm like, sure it does. But in for the 3 months it's not covered up, every time someone walks by it, I'm like, look at that hack, you know. And it's the same. I had this conversation with our millwork team. We had um we build all our cabinetry. I walked a different job recently, and these outlets got cut in the back of the cabinet, and they got cut like a beaver did it. And I'm like, what the hell? And so I kind of chewed out one of my cabinet guys. He's like, no, we didn't do it. Blah 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 did it. And so I go speak to him, and I'm like, hey, listen. Obviously, we didn't set the expectation with you, but I know that these get covered up. I know we're building a box around these, but everything gets cut like someone's looking at it. And like the sink, when you put the sink in the bottom of the cabinet, you got to cut the hole for the drain for the garbage disposal. When that plumber's laying on his back connecting it, I want him to look up and be like, damn, that's a nice hole. Not like, hey, did he use a dull metal blade to cut that thing?
Come
Right.
on my lap.
Oh God.
Damn, that's a nice
But
hole.
it's like setting the expectation, and yeah, maybe it's you doing it the first few times and snapping that line or drilling those holes, or Tyler setting the electrical boxes. But it's like, there's a reason for it. It's like, well, hey, why'd you put the box here? It's like, well, I added a stud and mounted the box for you because I wanted it centered under the window, because otherwise it was going to be an inch and a half off center.
Mm-hmm.
And to the electrician, it's like, oh, I didn't realize that was an important detail. And oh shit, you did it 20 times throughout this house. Now I know. So now when I wire your next house, if I notice that these aren't centered, hopefully you tell the framer to put a stud where you need it. But if not, then I'm going to call attention to it and be like, hey, let me pad those over. Or can you put a block so I can pad them over?
Right.
Yeah, it's really tough, and I think that there's obviously benefits to remaining lean, and there's benefits to self-performing, but there's definitely something to be said for being immersed in the work day in and day out and having your hands dirty. I personally find it easier to be on a job and working a job to get good results than to manage a project and obtain the same results, because you're just not involved with it. Like, I always am very impressed by people who can manage a project and execute at a very high level, because you have to be so involved with that. And if you're splitting your time in so many different areas, like even today I was framing a ceiling out on the job, and I started at the far end and was ending at the hood end, and like the um vantage point of this kitchen's going to be looking at this hood, and I like should have picked my best joist for that part of the ceiling, and I'm like down to the end of my joist. I got a couple extra and they're all pretty shitty, and I ended up snapping a chalk line and like straight lining the joist, because I'm like, I don't want to put this boat ass joist on the ceiling like right at the hood, which everyone's going to look at. And I'm like, if I weren't here, would that have happened? And I just don't think it would, because like, and it's not to knock anyone, but either it wouldn't even be a thought, or it would just be like, fuck it, these are the joists that are here.
Right.
And I really think that it's hard to hit that level of execution. Like, and how would I expect a PM or a super to do that? Like, is he going to get up with a level and check every one of those joists, or just be like, I want to check like, probably not, right? There's a million other things that are going on that you need to think of.
But
that
you would
it
hope
is.
that you could get them to that point.
Yeah, I
And
mean
and
that
and
that would
maybe
be
it's like
nice.
you walk the job and realize, "Hey, what's going on here?" It's like, "Oh, I didn't even notice it." It's like, "All right, stop. Let's reassess, move that, redo that, cut that out." And it's like in that moment is hopefully a learning opportunity.
Yeah, you would hope so. I mean, I
It's not always, but
no, and maybe the expectation is, I mean, I understand how I am as a person, and what I want is different than what a lot of other people want. And I even think that just the standard that I set for myself is higher than most people, and I don't know how realistic the expectation is to say I'm going to be able to find a bunch of people who want to be doing what I do. And I also don't know if all of my customers would be willing to pay for that, right? Like if I was working on a job charging my rate and hiring somebody who deserved a much higher rate to work alongside of me, like that would increase the budget on that job exponentially, and I don't know how valuable that is to customers at the same time.
Yeah.
But if I could pull off and have somebody there to be doing the type of work that I want to be doing at a lower rate, like there's that argument as well. But I do like the idea, Jason, of being able to work one house at a time, have the same people who understand the same process and understand the build and the level of execution, and a lot of times relying on as few subs as possible. And that's not a knock at subs, but like Nick said, if you have somebody who's married and been in bed with that design for 6 months prior to starting that job, like I
mhm.
don't think my subs are taking the plans at home before the job and like sitting down with their team and being like, no, they're showing up. Where are the specs? Where are the plans? Where do you want things? And they're not, and maybe they aren't paid to be doing that, and that's why I want to take care of that. But I do like the idea of being able to devote 6 guys or girls to a project and finishing that project and moving on to the next. From my perspective.
On that end too, it's, I mean,
Uh oh.
I don't know if it's selfish reasons or not. It just creates a lot less, ideally, a lot less stress for me. I've noticed that with like the 4 projects that we have that we're trying to finish up. I'm trying to bounce around, not doing anything overly effective, and then kind of letting my team down, letting my clients down, because we're not meeting some expectations, or I'm needed somewhere else, and I'm prioritizing trying to get something done, and then my crew feels like I'm not there for them on hustling to get something done. Today, for example, I chose to do a bunch of office work, get a revised budget out, and we're kind of at a crunch time to get this place done, for at least cleaned up, and whatever we're going to get done for these people that are coming up the 4th of July. Yeah, and it's brought to my attention that it'd be preferred that I was on site doing getting it done, and I'd like to be able to do that. So being on one job, immersed in that work, also will, for a young company, I think will help create those standards that and systems that we talk about wanting to implement. When you can, lack of better terms, dumb something down. Here's this one project. Here's how we want to do it. There's 4 or 5 of us on the site. Let's just say this is how we're going to do it from now on. We'll put it on paper somewhere, and we have been able to do that. And it's kind of unfortunate, because you get into a project, and whether it sounds great from the start, or in with a client, and it's like, if only it was a 3-day gig or 15 minutes or something like that. Instead, it's a year and a half, and you want to put all these changes in place, but you really can't until it's done. Some things are
Yeah.
done anyway.
So
I found that being a challenge.
what's your role within the company in a perfect world?
My role is, perfect world is, we're doing one good build at a time. I've got my crew. I'm on site with bags on, probably I'd say 3 to 4 days a week, and I can take an office day. So it's take a Friday, or take whatever day that is, to be able to do my invoicing, or if I need to meet with a potential lead, just pick that day, and then ideally that would allow me to maybe enjoy some weekends again at some point in my life, instead of doing all we've all been there, doing all your
Mm.
business stuff on the weekends and nights and early mornings, to create that little bit of balance. which I think would then transfer down to like my business, everyone else in my business being a little less stressed out of what we're doing.
Yeah, I like don't mean to like rain on the parade. It's really hard to say I'm going to get like all of your paperwork and invoicing and all of that shit that you're going to be able to allocate a day or two a week to, because
Sure.
it's like I've told myself that for 15 years, and it's just like certain things need to happen when they need to happen. And you'll be on site with your bags on and you'll be like, I just need to do this one thing, and it'll be noon and you'll be sitting on like a spackle bucket with the computer with your tool belt on, not doing anything for work, just like on your computer. It Unless you can create a system and an expectation where your customers and vendors and everyone else, where it's like, these are my office days and I'm not getting in the office and doing anything other than that, it just is almost impossible to be like, I'm just going to set these 2 days aside to get this stuff done, because things happen when they happen and they have to go that way.
Right.
But I don't know. I would agree. Like for us, there's no way I can have one day. I feel like there's just too much going on and I have to be adaptable. But if I had one project, I feel
That's
like
what I'm getting at. If you're,
I feel like if you're doing one project, it's a long-term project. There's way more ability to structure that one time outside of the field or in the office.
right. Like for example, I mean, this is, he said ideal, which, what's ideal
Fail.
is, hey, we're doing one project. It's cost plus. We're tracking all of our, material purchases. That's a pretty easy file to keep even in the truck. Labor hours, I'm on site with everyone, easy to track.
I guess my question there is, why not outsource that or have someone do the accounting? Do you enjoy it?
No, I hate it.
Yeah, why wouldn't you outsource that and stay in the field?
I guess, growing it as a business and figuring that part out is probably wise to farm that out. I mean, I keep my own, QuickBooks, and my accountant's got like a live look in. And
I know why you don't do it. It's the same reason that I struggled with it.
We all think we can do everything.
You don't want to take the time to train someone. Like we spent 18 months building our accounting process. It was painful. I almost fired her twice. And I'm being like, not even to be funny, just like I was like, I can't do this. Like you're asking me questions and stuff about process. I don't even know.
Yeah.
But looking back, 3 years later, I'm like, shit. Like, I'm glad I did it. Like I didn't realize we were losing, $100,000 a year and missing receipts. It's like, that's why we didn't make any money that year. It was like, it was in $2 Home Depot receipts.
We never charged anyone for this.
No one. We did the math. It was like $150,000 in missing receipts that we tracked down. It was substantial. Like I was like, all right, you've proved your value. Like I get it, but.
And I don't know if it'd be easier. Like one, and again, I think it's because we all start something. We all want to. Yeah, I feel like when you start,
you want to understand the process before you
in
outsource
control of every part of it.
Totally.
And so it's like for me, it's like, yeah, I keep my own. I've dabbled with different softwares. Like I got into
because you don't want to do it. Like you're fine. You're looking for a tool that makes doing what you don't like easier. I've done the same thing.
And you don't have time to even learn the software, so you just.
I forget what it was. It was a software. It was like $2,000 a year. Signed up for it. Super cool. Stopped using it, and then renewed, and it auto renewed. And I'm like, oh shit, I gotta cancel that. So I call. I'm like, hey, so sorry, I want to cancel. Yeah, no problem. You're canceled. It will expire in 11 months. And I'm like, could I cancel now? Get a refund? And they're like, no. I'm like, can you look at my account and see when the last time I logged in was? And they were like, 10 months ago. I'm like, yeah. So, and they were like, no. And I'm like, shit. And it was exactly that. I downloaded it, paid for it because I was like, this will make me do the accounting. I can do this. And it's like, no, I can't.
No.
Yeah, mine was QuickBooks, and I'm like paying for QuickBooks and then trying to teach myself how to do QuickBooks in my spare time. And then my accountant's like, you still have your QuickBooks? And I was like, yeah. She's like, do you ever go in there and look at anything? I was like, nah, I don't really even know how to use it. And it, like, I got it before I hired my bookkeeper.
Mhm.
And then she's like, if you want me to do all that, I looked at what it costs you a month and it'd actually be less money. And I'm like, yeah, why would I never? That's like, why do I even have that?
Right.
And I had the realization when I was sitting there banging my head against the wall trying to figure out how to operate QuickBooks, and then I could just hire somebody to do it and not have to learn it and not have to pay for it. And it's like, yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like my wife's business has a financial officer that handles all of that, and it's like, hey, that's a lot of stress off your plate. You're not trying to
Yeah.
run the project, and for me, it's I've kind of and it's probably from having like the project management background. It's like, oh, the accounting, that's just job costing, that's not real accounting. And it's like, oh, what about all the operating costs and
Yeah.
payroll and everything else that I'm taking care of? It's like, yeah, it's
Yeah. Like, what's your budget for 24? It's like, I don't know, the same as it was for 23. It's
That
like,
was different than 22.
yeah.
And it was,
yeah. So
it,
yeah, that's probably as we progress, like I'd like to take things off my plate to you know create some time for things outside of work would be ideal. And it's what everyone kind of works for in some fashion.
So you think of an ideal situation for you in the business, but what about the flip side to the client? Like with a small team, with you in the field, with and your part, let's just say part-time accounting, that doesn't leave a tremendous amount of time for what I would call project managing, meaning
Hmm.
like the communication. So from a more commercial project management background, there isn't a lot of that happening, right? Like you're not submitting formal submittals, RFIs. It's more like in progress. You're getting shit done, and when you need to, you'll reach out to the architect and or client, but it's pretty informal. Is that
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Is that what about the consideration for when you are getting into this upper echelon of clientele and projects? It like for us, as we grow, like we're finding that there's more and more demand for like commercial style project management, where it's like, no, you're building me a house, I'm spending $5 million, I expect the communication to be.
Right. I mean, I would imagine if we get into that arena would be hire
Mhm.
probably a little more field crew, and I would step back, even if I put a job trailer on
Yeah,
the site and was working from there, to be able to be that communication, to be
sure.
that point of contact. The way I envision it is, hey, end of the day, we're wrapping up. As the tools are getting put away, let me hop on my computer and fire off an update email, or hey, we're coming up on this, we need these selections decided on. um, so trying to balance the time with that, and with and it presents itself that hire other people that can take care of some of that if the budgets allow and the business growth allows. But I think for now and into the near future is keeping things smaller to get those systems, so when we want to grow, there's actually a base for it.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of my whatever failures early on is that, like, we're grow because there's a bunch of work going on and there's available people, but no real plan, no real structure, no expectation set, no nothing. It just kind of lost at sea trying to get things done, and that's not a good spot for anybody to be in.
No, I
yeah,
think.
in my mind, listening to what you want to do and building one house at a time with your crew, like the no-brainer would be to set up an on-site office that like
Mhm.
you're able to somewhat do both and split your time and not lose like a ton of productivity, or just being like, I'm completely out of the off the job site today or completely out of the office today, because there's going to be things that need to come up from a paperwork and a site work perspective, that I think that if that's all in one place, it's going to make your life so much easier.
Yeah, yeah, just having a little job trailer and, like, hey, it's lunch or whatever. I got to take an hour to send this over to the architect, or whatever, while you guys are doing whatever. That's probably. I mean, that's where we want to get, and it's been a struggle to get there, trying to wrap up the projects that we have. Like I said, we've been overextended, like a lot of people have, and schedules. We took on work with because lead time was going to be ridiculous on things, and of course, we get told 32 weeks on Windows and all this other stuff, and so we take on another project because we don't want to stand around looking at Windows, and then
Mhm.
you get two projects to finish at the same time.
Well, I think that directly relates back to your experience with pre-construction and planning and building a house in 20 weeks.
Yeah, and it's not the case out here at all. Like, and that's been, but you
No,
gotta.
but I mean, I think that like just the mindset of understanding that. I forget who it was, but a couple episodes ago we were talking about production building. I think it was on the podcast, but they're talking about supers and their experience of, and having experience in production building gives you the opportunity to see what's possible when you push a schedule. And also like the fact that you're watching a home, multiple foundations go in rather than one every 2 years, right? Where
Right,
it's like you're delivering a house every 20 weeks. You're flying.
Yeah.
And you, I mean, it's doable. Like the most extreme example is like that show that they build a house in like 7 days. And
right,
it's like, oh yeah, but that house is shit. Like they got to send in a crew to fix everything for like 2 months after that. It's like,
sure,
okay, so 2 months in a week and you get a pretty good house.
right,
It's like the point is like the only way you're able to accomplish that is good planning. Um, and I mean that like even and then you go to the opposite side of it, like doing one house at a time. You know that's equally as important to be really well planned because, like you just said, you deal with something that windows that are 32 weeks, and if that's not considered in the master plan, and you only got one job going on, and you don't have another one to like your business, what are you're pausing your business.
right.
You're
It's
pausing
just
guys, pausing paychecks. It's like that, or you're paying paychecks and they're not producing anything.
right, yeah. Then you get the cash flow issues and everything else. So that's So there's things that need to be considered for that, and that's the idea of you have one at a time, but you almost have maybe I kind of still call it like one and a half going
Mhm.
at the time. Like so, if we're framing a
Right.
house right now, we get the groundwork started on the next one. So if we
Yeah.
get a long delay,
Totally.
we can go start framing on this one if necessary.
Yeah.
Is where we want to be.
It's smart.
Yeah. My biggest suggestion would be to keep planning these goals, keep making these goals, and just have little check-ins on them. Things will never go according to plan, and what works for you this year may not work for you next year. So I think it's important to keep the big picture in mind. Um, Continue to track your costs and see what it takes for you to operate and be profitable as a business. I know I made a joke earlier about like 7 years is when you start making money, but a lot of times it just takes that long to realize that things aren't working, or aren't sustainable, and you're so driven to make everything work and to come out on top that you do that, but it's not the best business practice. And I think that there's things that you can implement, to change that and ensure that the health of yourself, your employees, your subcontractors, your entire team, is first and foremost. But I definitely would make a big picture plan and then just have small check-ins on it and just make little changes. Like you said, the small incremental sustainable growth, and ensuring that you just keep your finger on the pulse of that, because it is constantly changing. And like what worked for last job isn't necessarily going to work for this job. But as long as you understand what your baseline is, you have something good to go off of, which will make business a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know what you don't know until you screw up and try not to do it again. That's
Yeah, it's just like the smaller you are, the less those mistakes hurt.
right,
They still hurt, but just from a multiplier perspective, the numbers aren't quite as big, so you're able to salvage it a little bit easier than when you're bigger, doing higher dollar jobs. And then as you gain experience, you're able to sustain a little bit more exposure, or more willing to put yourself out there a little bit more, and then take on those projects that have a little higher risk. But I think that those are the more rewarding projects for you. But it's definitely going to take some time to get there, especially you're in a new market. I would say that your market is probably changing on a daily basis. And like I said, as long as you have some sort of baseline or what your years are working out to be with who you have on board, and you know what's a good year and what's a bad year, you can implement changes.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you wanted to dig into, or anything that we should have asked you about that we didn't?
I don't think so. We touched on a lot. I was gonna ask like how, because you and Tyler, your business, and Nick, your business, completely different, and
Mm.
how often you guys wish you had like each other's business. Because I occasionally, when things are chaotic, I'm like, man, I should have spent by myself with a van, and life would be so easy. And
I don't think Tyler's ever wished he had my
Never,
business.
never.
But I probably wish I had Tyler's business. I don't know. Maybe like half a dozen times a year.
yeah,
I mean, like it goes. I said it earlier. It it's hard, and it's not supposed to be easy. And I have really, really high expectations, and I'm not always the best communicator as to what those expectations are. So that is a very difficult mix to have such high expectations, but not be communicating them all the time. So it's something that I'm, constantly working on internally. So I think that when I sit and text Tyler at 9 p.m. saying I wish I just was working by myself, it's probably because I'm not communicating effectively and my team doesn't know what my expectations are.
hmm
Um, and I quickly make an adjustment, and we get back. I get back out there and get the team aligned, and we move forward and progress. Um,
Yeah, I mean, there's challenges for both, and there's pros and cons to both, and the grass is always going to be greener. There's days where I wish that I did things differently, and there's days that I don't. And I think that as long as the big picture, when you look back on 3 months, 6 months, a year, that you have more days happy, you're spending more days happy, and you're having more days where you are grateful for what you're doing, and experience and continuing to learn. I think that you're probably where you should be, because you can look at anyone else and what they're doing, and it's gonna be more appealing or better. But I like to believe that you're where you're supposed to be for one reason or another. And I'm definitely not set up for Nick's type of business. I'd be in jail 100%. Be like,
yeah,
well, you killed 13 people in one fell swoop. I'd be like, yeah, it's true. They were annoying me.
it was a rough morning. My twin brother lives in Massachusetts and works for a big construction company in Boston, and he's a state superintendent doing like $190 million pharmaceutical builds and stuff like that. I'm like, that sounds mostly like hell, but also someday good. Like you've got 200 people on site working, and you're supposed to be just managing. But I'm like, that also sounds maybe like the worst thing ever. It's a funny dynamic because he'll say the same thing like, "Oh, it must be nice to be up in Maine and build houses," and it's like, yeah, it's great. Except for I've got my small stresses up here that drive me to an early grave half the time. It feels like.
yeah, I
Nah,
mean,
the grass is always greener
right.
for sure.
Like,
Um,
I mean, there's times where I think about just going back to. I shouldn't say that because I don't actually think about going back to work for someone else. But there's been times I've thought about that because I really enjoyed parts of commercial construction, and most of it was just understanding like production, how to produce at a fast pace. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I I use this analogy or this example constantly in my team, and my team I think at this point hates me for it. But it's like we're building a home that is say 8,000 square feet, and I'm watching another construction company build a casino in the same amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, they have thousands of people and they're working 3 shifts. I'm like, could we have done that here and built
Yeah.
it in a month? It's like, well, I'm like, it's not that I want you to. It's not that I want to work 3 shifts. Not nor would we be allowed to, or have 1,000 people on site. But the point is there's ways to do it faster.
Right.
And speed isn't the only, like, speed is not our priority. Quality is, but cost and speed are right behind that, and
Right.
and they should be you should be toggling on both of them accordingly. So I'm mostly interested as we grow, like, becoming more efficient in terms of how long it takes to build something. We're embarking on our first spec, and I use the term spec loosely because it's very much a product. Like, there's no comps for it. It's very custom. Like,
Sure.
it's very architecturally driven. And my team asked me the other day, like, what's the schedule on this? And I told them 12 months. And they're like, for this? I'm like, yeah. And they're like,
Better get moving.
meanwhile, it's like trapped in permitting right now. But the point, I'm like, there's ways to do this. Let's think about this. Let's plan this out. Let's think about the design all the way through completion. And we have the right architect on the team where it's like, he's in design development, or he was in schematic, and he's like, I need to talk to your HVAC guy because I got to lay out his ductwork. I'm like, most guys in residential aren't doing that.
No.
And he's
my latest schematic design was 3 pages and a 2-page spec.
Yeah, I'm getting a schematic design that's 40 pages, and it's like, we'll be 100 something pages when it's done. And it's, and because they understand the value of thinking this all the way through. And not only that, like, the last point on that would be that also gives you the opportunity to value engineer. Like, if you're thinking about this all the way through completion, you're going to find the things that are making it more complex and say, hey, wait, before we do that, why don't we do it this way? Because it would be easier or more cost effective. When you're in the middle of it and you're reacting to that situation, you can't do that. It's like, oh, it would have been way easier to do it this, but now it's too late, or we would have to stop the project in order to adjust that.
Right. It's time and money, which no one wants to burn on a project.
Right. So, Jason, appreciate you being on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for reaching out and and requesting.
Yeah.
I was gonna say next time I'm up in Maine, but I don't know if I'll ever get that far north.
Hey, you know what? Seriously. People are coming up here. They're getting our Bar Harbor's getting too crowded for people, so they're coming up this way.
But Bar Harbor's pretty cool.
It is.
It is pretty cool. But if I pop up there, I'll definitely take a ride up, because I did the same thing Tyler did. I opened Zillow. I have it saved on my other screen. I'm like, all right, I want to know what's up there on the water for less than.
I know. I was looking at like
100.
50 acres, and it was like $30,000 or something. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
When we moved up here, it's about 7 years ago, we're looking at houses, and they were like 30 to 50 grand, because no one was coming up here. And then, we were fortunate. We got our home, and then over the last couple of years, we bought up a couple pieces of property. I'd like to, at some point, build a little spec house. I got a spot that overlooks another lake that would be a nice spot for someone to buy a house on. But it's a unique spot for some opportunity, because it is, for being on the East Coast, it's, it's a lot different. It's affordable and very, underdeveloped, to say the least.
Mm.
Yeah. Plus, you married up, so you should be good.
Right. That's right.
We should all take a page out of your book. That was the smart move.
Marry up and put all the stress you put in your life is self-induced.
Hell yeah. This is all just a hobby.
That's right.
Jason, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
If I usually don't end up that far north, but maybe I will. Maybe I'll take a little vacation.
Let me know.
You got to take Cape Air to Bar Harbor and then drive.
Nah, I'm driving the whole way.
No,
I like 16 hours.
Yeah, and take Route 1 the whole way up the coast. Add another few hours to your trip. It's scenic.
At that point, why not?
Right.
Might as well.
Jason, if someone wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
I would say, Instagram, the Pine State Builders, or my email. I do most of that through there. So.
All right. Well, if you are in the the most northern coast of Maine, looking to build, reach out to Jason and his team on his Instagram channel or his website.
Awesome.
We'll have that in the show notes.
Cool.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it, man.
Appreciate it.